Welcome to the Training for Translators podcast.
Do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job with our weekly episodes for ambitious freelance translators and interpreters.
Visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com to subscribe to our newsletter, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast.
Now here's your host, Corinne McKay.
Greetings, listeners. This is Corinne McKay with episode 4 of the Training for Translators podcast on finding the motivation to market. And before I dive into that, I just wanted to say thank you for the positive feedback that you've been sending me. A number of listeners have emailed me to tell me that they are enjoying the podcast, and the podcast has gotten a few really lovely reviews in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I thought I would take the time to just read you one of those. This is from Andre Joseph Bergeron. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And it's in Apple Podcasts, which says, accessible, authoritative, and loaded with hard-won wisdom from a seasoned pro, these podcasts are commentaries on Corinne's vast library of blog posts. They are inspiring to the neophyte and helpful even to the experienced translator or interpreter. In short, a gift to the profession from a humane and super responsive leader in the field. Aw, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that people are finding value in the podcast, and I hope that you continue to. A couple of listeners have also asked me whether I would consider including interviews in future podcast episodes. And the answer to that is yes. I just want to establish a consistent habit of releasing podcast episodes. And I also need to figure out the technology of how I would include another person or people, because right now I record the podcast in Audacity using a studio microphone, and I would need to find a setup. I know that those exist because I've been guests on lots of other people's podcasts, but I would just have to figure out a setup to include other people. But yes, I am considering that for the future. And thanks for your suggestions. So let's dive in to this week's episode on finding the motivation to market. This podcast episode originally appeared as a blog post, or the blog post on which this podcast episode is based originally appeared on my blog on June 19th, 2024. The blog post that appeared the week before this one included my observations on the amount of time that it takes to grow and run a successful freelance business. And in that blog post, I had said, just, everyone's going to be different, but if you want to put some numbers on it, plan on spending about 10% of your time on marketing and about 40% of your time total on activities other than translating or interpreting. And by the way, no one does that. So if we just take, working 40 hours a week, it is really, really rare that I meet a freelancer who spends 4 hours a week on marketing and business development. And when I tell people that, you really should not plan on spending more than 60% of your time generating income, a lot of freelancers are really, really surprised. Like, they think that if they work 40 hours a week, they should be able to generate income, 39 and a half hours a week. And the reality is your business is going to die. That's a topic for a different day, because today we're talking about motivation. So what happened after I originally posted that blog post about the 10%, 40% rule, spend 10% of your time on marketing and 40% on non-translation, non-interpreting activities? I got a number of emails from readers who said something like this. Yeah, I totally get it. But how do I motivate myself to do that? When I don't have any translation or interpreting work, I just do other things. For example, I do stuff around my house instead of marketing. Most importantly, this is a really common issue. And because of that, I thought it was worth its own blog post and thus its own podcast episode. And I'm going to address that with a few ideas which are coming in no particular order. This doesn't mean that they're most important to least important. They're just the order in which I thought of them. Number one, this is not an exaggeration. I think a lot of freelancers hear these kinds of statistics, for example, aim to spend 4 hours a week on marketing and say, like, oh, that's so extreme. Who would do that? I mean, who would do that might be a legitimate question because very few people do. But I would say that there is something about us as a species of translators and interpreters that we sort of think the work should be coming to us instead of us having to go find the work. And the reason that I say that about us, quote unquote, as a species, is because I belong to a number of freelance writer, LinkedIn and Facebook groups. And I actually think that among freelance writers, copywriters, content marketing writers, that kind of thing, there is a lot more of an acceptance that you have to always be marketing. So for example, it is not uncommon that I will see freelance writers who say, first thing every day when I sit down to work, I drink my coffee and I, listen to or watch the morning news and I market for 30 to 45 minutes. And they do that like at least 3 days a week. One example that I really love, and I will link this in the show notes, and I've talked about this a bunch, but I just really love this article. There's a freelance finance writer whose name is Carter Kilman, Kilmann, who wrote a LinkedIn article about a marketing campaign that he did after he took a prospecting class with Ed Gandia. So if any of you are not familiar with Ed Gandia, you really need to get to know him. His last name is Gandia, and little known fact, first language, Spanish. You can hear it a little bit in Ed's voice when you know that, but yeah, first language Spanish. So he's, one of us, I feel like, or he understands translators and interpreters. And I also think that most of Ed Gandia's stuff, he's a marketing coach, by the way, I should have said that. Most of Ed Gandia's stuff is ostensibly for freelance writers, but really applies to what translators and interpreters do. Carter Kilman took Ed Gandia's prospecting class and then sent pitch emails to 100 clients in 3 months. And I would say that his results align pretty closely with my own experience and what I tell other freelancers to expect, which is that it took him 54 hours total to do this, research and write to 100 potential clients. And I usually say it's going to take you about 20 to 25 hours of marketing in order to find a new direct client. So here we're talking about direct clients, not agencies. Of those 100 potential clients, listen to this, 88 did not respond at all, and 2 of them became actual clients. So I think for most of us, we are not surprised by that return rate of 2 clients for 100 marketing emails. But the part that we gloss over and the part that is really the hardest emotionally to accept is the 88 who didn't respond at all. So when I tell people to expect a response rate or success rate, let's say, of 1 to 2%, like 1 to 2 new clients per 100 marketing pitches, I think Carter Kilman's experience bears this out. And I also think that we need to really be emotionally ready for the 88 who never responded in any way. Tip number 2, stop worrying about motivation and instead worry about consistency. Every year, I run a March Marketing Madness challenge group, and one of my key points in that group is we all obsess about how do you stay motivated when it comes to marketing. And to be honest, I think that's the wrong question because you don't have to stay motivated, you just have to stay consistent. You can hate marketing. right? I think a lot of us really focus so much on the fact that we don't like marketing. And so we think like, well, it's not going to be effective because I don't enjoy it. And in reality, that is not true. And I give an example here in the blog post. I have pretty high maintenance teeth. I have a lifelong minor to moderate jaw alignment problem. So I had to get braces when I was like in my 40s, running around looking like a teenager when I was like 42 to correct this jaw alignment problem. I have hard teeth, and so they crack easily. And to be honest, I kind of hate all of the maintenance that I have to do on my teeth. But yet, I don't sit there and think, how can I find this motivation? How can I find, joy in flossing my teeth? I don't think about that. I know that the consequence of not maintaining my teeth is that I'm going to have to get implants or dentures. And really, that sounds like kind of a weird example, but you can apply this thinking to your freelance business. Either you can take care of your business or it's going to wither and die. You don't really need to look for the motivation. You just need to find a marketing routine that you can tolerate and stick with enough to keep up with some level of consistency. And before we go on to the next tip, I'm going to pause here for a brief message from Training for Translators. Greetings, listeners. If you're enjoying this podcast, you should think about taking a class with Training for Translators. You can learn more about that at my website, trainingfortranslators.com. My self-paced 4-week classes, Getting Started as a Freelance Translator or Interpreter in the Age of AI, and Direct Client Marketing Launchpad, run twice a year and are always open for registration. You can also check out our monthly masterclasses taught by me and a select roster of guest instructors. After my recent masterclass on marketing to direct clients and increasing your income, a student commented, "This class was just what I was looking for. It introduced a whole new set of marketing methods and helped me set realistic expectations for myself. I really appreciated that Corinne included both practical steps and concrete examples to support her recommendations." If you'd like those types of results in your own business, hop on over to trainingfortranslators.com and click the Upcoming Classes tab. Welcome back. Let's move on to the next tip, which is one that is a little more esoteric, but I think equally important. And that is understand why you do or don't do the things that you do or don't do. That sounds a little obtuse, so let me explain. A good friend of mine, shout out to you, Beth Hayden, introduced me to Gretchen Rubin. Her last name is Rubin. And I guess that you would call Gretchen Rubin like a personal growth guru, except that she went to Yale Law School. She did not start out as a psychologist. She started out as a lawyer, an attorney. And Gretchen Rubin came up with what she calls the 4 tendencies framework. I'll link that in the show notes. And basically, this is a framework that helps us understand how we, and for that matter, other people, deal with both internal and external demands. So here's what it consists of. You answer a bunch of questions about how you respond to demands that are put on you by other people. So that would be external demands or expectations, and demands or expectations that you put on yourself. So internal ones. And there are 4 types. When I took this quiz, and I am really not a person who loves, magazine personality quizzes, the Gretchen Rubin 4 Tendencies quiz really helped me understand my own and other people's productivity tendencies, which first of all, I think really helps you stay consistent and stay motivated if that is a problem for you, or understand why other people do or don't stay consistent or motivated. So my example is that I am an upholder, which means that I find freedom in discipline. To be honest, the first question in the four tendencies framework is something about, or I'm not sure whether she switches the questions up, but one of the main questions is something about how hard do you find it to follow through on a commitment that only you know about? So there's no external accountability. You haven't told anyone else. You're not doing like a challenge group. You're just doing this because you want to or it's important to you. And to be honest, my reaction to that was like, why would you make the commitment if it's not important to you? I'm not saying this to be condescending. I'm just saying it's really interesting to know how your own brain works. And it's really difficult to understand how other people's brains work when it's different than yours. Because to me, that is like a non question. Why would I make a commitment if it's not important to me? Now, on the other hand, at the sort of, I guess you would say the opposite end of the spectrum from an upholder is what Gretchen Rubin calls a rebel. And the slogan for rebels is, you can't make me and I can't either. So rebels are people who really, really struggle with both external and internal expectations. And to be fair, like one thing I think is really helpful about the four tendencies framework is Gretchen Rubin frames all of them in a very non-judgmental way. For example, doing the framework exercise really helped me understand, and I now express this to other people. It seems like the most desirable tendency is upholder, right? People who, if you put an expectation on me, I'm going to fulfill it. And if I put an expectation on myself, I'm going to fulfill it. Sounds great, right? But it's not. I mean, it is great, but the point being there are downsides. For example, I tend to continue to stick with things that I don't enjoy doing or that are no longer important to me simply because I said I would do them. I also struggle to find joy in or meaning in things that to me don't have a point. And an example that I gave in the blog post I wrote about this topic is I really love knitting. I learned how to knit as a child, and I loved knitting my whole life. But a couple of years ago, quit knitting and gave away all of my knitting stuff because I got sick of deciding what to do with the products of the knitting. So to me, like once the knitting didn't have a point anymore, it wasn't fun. So I think that's the downside of being an upholder. And I would say on the, flip side that a lot of people who are rebels are much more creative and spontaneous probably than most upholders. Like I don't actually think of myself as a very creative or spontaneous person. I love structure. So, and I have given a couple of examples when I've been working with students. For example, I meditate with the Calm app pretty much every day. And one time I was on an airplane and I found myself getting intensely worried about whether the Calm app logs your meditation if your phone is in airplane mode. Like to those of you who aren't upholders, that probably sounds like the craziest thing you've ever heard. Like, am I going to get credit for this meditation if I'm not, connected to the internet when I do it? But to me, like that was really bothering me because, I set a goal to meditate with the Calm app 4 times a week, and I wanted to know that I was going to get credit for it. That's an example of what the upholder brain does. Now, why am I going on and on about this in an episode about marketing? Because I think you need to understand which of the tendencies you are, or at least have some idea of what does motivate you in order to stay consistent with marketing. Next topic. Do you hate marketing or do you just resent it? I think it's important to identify that hatred and resentment are 2 different emotions. I'm a very positive person, and I still think that's an important distinction. A lot of us hate marketing because our feeling is like we just want to translate or interpret. When I talk to specifically translators who have lost a lot of work due to the current AI boom, most of them say, I don't really want to work with direct clients because I don't want to be a translation salesperson and a project manager. I want to be a translator. That's understandable, but my sense would be that is increasingly called an in-house job, right? A job where all you do is translate or interpret is more and more called an in-house job. Resentment is a completely different story. So where resentment shows up is when we think, clients should be coming and finding me. Why is it so much harder now to find good work? Why don't clients understand the value of a professional? Why are other freelancers working for such low rates? That's resentment. I don't really have a quick fix for those kinds of emotions because they're very complex and I think have to do with more like macro trends than just our own businesses. But I think that just saying out loud that you feel that way is kind of the first step to overcoming those emotions. Next, do you have depression, anxiety, ADHD, or some other way in which your brain works differently? I am saying this for real as someone who does not have any of those neurodiverse conditions, but as someone who has a lot of people in my life who would answer yes to this question. And I say that with a great deal of empathy. If you are that person who is chronically feeling like, I don't get any enjoyment out of my job. I'm so paralyzed with anxiety that I can't even try to market because I'm so afraid of failing. I know what to do, but I just can't do it. I feel like this whole marketing thing is pointless because clients don't want to work with me anyway. I keep missing deadlines because I can't make myself work on the projects I do have. Then I think you may want to take a deeper look at what's going on in your brain and whether some combination of therapy or medication or both might help you. And again, I say this as someone who considers myself a mental health advocate, and I have lots of people I love who have been helped greatly by therapy, medication, or both. The reality is that feeling like you can't do what you want to do in life because your brain is holding you back is not fun. And most importantly, you deserve to not feel that way. Final topic. Do you understand your why? Do you understand why you are doing this? I know that this whole idea of like finding your why is kind of a trendy topic, but there is a reason for that because it's really, really important. As freelancers, we deal with lots and lots of things that an employer would deal with for you, from paying self-employment tax to serving as the IT director, marketing director, professional development director, HR manager, to having no guaranteed income stream. We deal with a lot of things that people with employers don't deal with. Why? Well, we have a lot of different reasons, and I think it's really important to identify them. And here are some of mine. Perhaps most importantly, I really enjoy making my own decisions. Whether or not those decisions are right, they are surely not always right. The responsibility is on me, not on someone else telling me to do something that I knew was a bad idea. I really don't think that I could stand working for an employer and thinking, oh my gosh, this is like a slow motion train wreck, but yet I'm forced to implement it because that's the employer's decision. Number two, I don't think that any in-house job would be flexible enough for what I want to do in life. For an American, I take a lot of vacation. I take off about 6 weeks a year. Since a couple of years ago, I usually don't work on Friday afternoons unless I have something urgent going on. And I don't really want to have to go to my boss and be like, could I take an extra long lunch to go to a yoga class? Again, not something I want to put up with. Another factor that is a little bit different is that I hate worrying about money. This sounds really basic, but I think a major reason that I have a pretty high income goal is just I hate worrying about money. I really like the feeling of having, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in the bank, of thinking, life has so many problems that you can't fix with money. Like anyone who you or a loved one has been through a significant health crisis, you know that, for example, that is a situation that you can't fix with money other than by paying for medical care. So I really like to be able to just throw some money at the problems that you can fix with money. I have a lot of other why factors for freelancing, but I think for me, those are the big ones. And I think identifying why you are doing this whole freelance thing in the first place can be a really good motivator. So my daughter, who is the same age as my freelance business, is now 22 and a lot closer to thinking about her own career than to being a child playing on the floor in my office. But when she was a child playing on the floor in my office, I would look at her and think, I cannot fail as a freelancer because if I do, my other option is to get an in-house job and put her in full-time childcare, which, by the way, I'm not judging anyone who chooses that option. I'm just saying that that was not the life that I wanted for me or for her. So if you too are struggling to find the motivation or consistency to work on your freelance business, I hope those tips are helpful. That brings us to the end of episode 4 of the Training for Translators podcast. The podcast is hosted by me, Corinne McKay. The intro and outro were created and recorded by Shadow Studio. The podcast is technologically hosted on Libsyn and is recorded in Audacity using a Shure MV7 Plus microphone. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to talk to you in a future episode.
Thanks for listening to the Training for Translators podcast, helping you do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job.
To leave a comment, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast, visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com.
If you enjoy the Training for Translators podcast, please tell your colleagues and friends about it and leave us a review in your favorite podcast app.